Hi, thank you very much for the introduction, Javier. And I'm going to pick up more or less where Henning left off, where he gave a very nice overview of what exactly the CERA course will contain. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it means to me in a day-to-day basis, and what I think the value is for actuaries and also for the companies who will hire CERA qualified professionals. So to give a little bit of background as to what I've been asked to talk about and also why I've been asked to talk, I've just made this one quick slide. So I've been asked to discuss my experience as a CERA, my view on the value for what CERA means to the professionals, the qualification, and what the qualification will mean to companies who hire these CERA professionals. A little bit about myself. I'm from South Africa originally. I've been living in Spain for almost 2 years, about a year and a half, working for Milliman as a senior consultant. And prior to that, I was working in the Netherlands for 7 years. I studied through the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries based in the UK. And through them, I obtained the CERA qualification in 2013. So I have almost 5 years of experience as a CERA. And this is why I have been asked to talk to you today. So Henning also touched on this, but I think it's important to mention a little bit the context that we're all working in as actuaries. And we've seen in the past few years a big trend. We started off with TV, EEV, we still see a lot of these topics today. Moving over to MCV, from MCV we've got Solvency II, and now the next big thing coming up is IFRS 17. And all of these topics show an increasing importance of the role that an actuary plays inside a company. Okay, we can talk specifically about insurance companies and reinsurance companies for now, but also, as Henning said, the CERA qualification is talking about risk management at an enterprise level, and the focus is on concepts, so these concepts can easily be applied to other types of industries as well, not only the insurance industry and not only the financial industry. So we notice within many companies that there is an increased focus on risk management, alignment of different departments, where we're all starting to see that companies are reporting certain measures. They're reporting their embedded value, they're reporting their Solvency II figures, and we're starting to see that different departments have to work together more and more to be able to produce the numbers that companies have to report. So there's an increasing focus in these areas. So now I will move to the 3 areas that I've been asked to talk about, starting with my experience as a CERA professional. So CERA has given me the risk management basis that has allowed me to be involved in many of the risk management topics which have become increasingly important for actuaries in the last few years. So I've divided them into 3 main areas: the quantitative risk measures, the business development, how we can look at certain products within understanding what they will contribute from a quantitative perspective, and also looking at qualitative risk management, because many of the risks that insurance companies will be dealing with are not necessarily tangible and cannot be quantified very easily. So we need to think of other ways in which we can manage these risks. Within the quantitative risk measures, I've been involved in the development and some other support around the ORSA process, specifically the development of ORSA models. We noticed different approaches inside the market. Some people want a very integrated model to do everything more or less together and try and obtain the maximum amount of consistency. Other companies have very different processes involved and need to combine these processes in different ways. So in this case, the aggregation of risks, and particularly market risks and then underwriting risks, need to be combined. And that also has an impact on, for example, strategic asset allocation and in general, asset and liability management, where you start looking at the interaction between your asset portfolio and your liabilities. And this can be in multiple areas. This can be in the measurement of your time value of options and guarantees. This can be in the calculation of your interest rate risk under Solvency II. In Spain, of course, we have special ALM rules where your assets backing can have an influence on the valuation of your reserves. So the ALM topic is a very interesting one to look at in general, and in particular when we start going forward and looking at IFRS 17, we also have to look at the assets which are sitting behind certain blocks of liabilities. Something else that my CERA has helped me with is the alignment, the risk alignment of pricing models. What we've seen with many companies, and maybe some of you can relate to this, is when companies are calculating the value of their new business that has been written throughout the year, they report a very nice number and everyone is very happy. And then the risk department goes and includes that in their solvency calculations, and then they say, oh, but this business is adding a lot of capital to it's very capital intensive, we need to be careful about this, maybe we should restructure the products in some way. So we've done a lot of work to try and reduce these differences by introducing an element of the Solvency II process into the pricing process so that we have better alignment between the different departments. Another important thing that we've been doing in this area is the optimization of capital, and this can be through either looking at your portfolio of products that you sell, or it can be the management of the assets which you are holding to be able to meet your liabilities. And it can also be other types of things. It can be risk transfer, whether you use reinsurance or whether you use some alternative form of risk management transfer. And all of these things can have an impact on the level of your SCR, the amount of capital that you need to continue writing business, and ultimately the solvency ratio that you will be reporting. Then in terms of business development, which links to the previous section, particularly around the pricing and the capital contribution of individual products, we've seen that we've started measuring the contribution of the new business towards the SCR, and we've looked at that on a standalone basis, which is interesting to know, but we've also looked at it if you add it to the already existing portfolio, because that, of course, is the most interesting criteria for an insurance company. Taking this a step further into new product development, you can take a look at how to design products in such a way that they use less capital in general, or they make the best use of the diversification available from the other risks which a company already has inside its portfolio. And another point which is related to this is the optimization of the reinsurance program, or also how you can go about, just in general, pricing of the reinsurance, either as a ceding party or from a reinsurance perspective, how you price the business that you accept from a ceding party. And this would be then quite similar to the pricing for a direct insurer, just with the reinsurance specifics taken into account. But the similarity is that you try and take the Solvency II aspect as an integral part of your pricing. So while there is a big focus on the quantitative risk management, there is also a big element which is the qualitative risk management. As actuarial processes are becoming more and more important for different companies, it's important to have a good level of control around them. And we notice that governance is becoming increasingly important for companies, and this will continue to do so as IFRS comes into the scope of insurance companies and reinsurance companies in the future. So what we've been doing in this field for the last couple of years, me personally, is the model validation. So setting up a framework to validate your models to make sure that the information that you're using to calculate your different KPIs and also the information that you're providing to senior management is reliable enough that they can make good business decisions based on your input. So there will be two phases to this. The one is setting up the framework that you will do your validation in. So maybe you need to make sure that you meet all the criteria under Solvency II, and you need to make sure that you have enough checks and controls in place that you don't have material errors in the numbers that you're reporting. And then there's also the validation of a particular model where you go through each of these steps and confirm that the model is good enough to be used. And if there are any things which need to be improved, there is a process in place to be able to improve the models to make sure that companies or that the information that you're providing to the directors is good enough. This also links to process improvement in general. So the governance is something that we've just touched on, just so that the senior management is comfortable that there are enough controls in place, that it is reliable, the information. And we've also noticed in many companies that there is a strong reliance on Excel sheets to do many adjustments or to do certain steps in between various stages of the calculation. And the automation of the flow of information during the calculation process is something which is becoming increasingly interesting for companies to reduce the possibility of manual errors, and also to try and speed up the process during reporting periods. Under IFRS, there will also be fast close reporting, where the deadlines for reporting your values will be shorter. So the automation process is likely to become even more important as companies want to make sure that things can go as quickly and as automatically as possible when doing their reporting. And one other thing which I've been involved in is the PARP process, or the Product Approval and Review process. And this is a process that you can do when designing new types of products, to make sure that you go through all of the correct steps to make sure that the products are beneficial to the policyholder, that they add value to the company, that they meet the different regulatory steps that are in place. And we see a lot of work in the Insurance Distribution Directive and PRIPS also at the moment, which is becoming an increasingly important part for different types of products with a financial aspect. And it's also about the review process. So in general, you can also do some things which will just compare your product to your competitors to make sure that you understand your position in the market when you're producing a new type of product. So that is what CERA has given me a lot of access to, these types of work that I've been involved in, and personally I find this very interesting. So having had access to that has been a very good experience for me. So next up I will talk a little more in general about what I think the value for CERA to professionals is. And I see three main areas that CERA can help different professionals. It can help you in your career development. It will also, all of these are of course quite linked. But it can help you by giving you increased exposure within the company, and it can also increase your opportunities inside and outside of the industry that you're currently working in. From the career development perspective, there's been a lot of work in risk management, and risk management is continuing to evolve in all aspects of actuarial work. So by following the CERA qualification, I think a professional is staying at the cutting edge of the developments in the industry and places them very well to be involved in any sort of change process which is going to happen at companies, or to be able to understand very well the situation, the financial situation that a company is in. This may translate into more opportunities within your company. Because if you're working actively in risk management, you'll notice that input from different departments is becoming increasingly important, and there needs to be more and more alignment between different departments. So if you're working in risk management, you will also talk to the marketing department, you'll talk to the actuarial department, you'll talk to the guys in charge of data, and you'll notice that a lot of the information for the company is being summarized in some of the work that you do. So you will become a sort of a hub of information, which will be quite interesting when you will have more opportunities to speak to different levels of management, to provide them with the information that they need and to make sure that they understand everything which is happening in the risk management framework as it is changing. So either Solvency II or in the future IFRS, because I keep mentioning IFRS because it has many features in common with Solvency II. There are some differences, of course, and it is ultimately an accounting exercise, but there are a lot of features which touch on risk management in IFRS. So we've more or less progressed now from career development into increased exposure, as we're noticing there's more and more interaction between different departments and more exposure to management and senior management. And along with the different controls and governance which is in place to make sure that there is more and more reliance on an actuary's or a CERA's work in the future, will give you more opportunities, and just speaking to more people will give you a larger network. Inside your company has been the focus, but of course speaking outside at different industry events could also be another way of increasing your exposure. All of this will probably lead to increased opportunities both within and without the industry. So as Henning mentioned, there are lots of applications for CERAs to work in, because the focus really as an enterprise risk management qualification is to look at a company holistically. So they have many different techniques for doing that, for the qualitative side and the quantitative side. And you just need to tweak the methods that you are taught to be catered specifically for the industry that you're working in. And that will give actuaries and CERAs the opportunity to work in a very large number of different industries. Some of the examples have already been mentioned. And so that's what I think the value to professionals will be. And the next slide I will talk about is what I think the value to companies will be, companies that hire CERA professionals specifically. So I see it as a term of a process, because it will, throughout time, there will be a larger and larger reliance on the work that CERAs provide. So one of the first things that will happen is companies will start to align and standardize the different metrics which are calculated by the different departments, and people will start reporting with the same goal in mind. So we're going to have an increased focus on IFRS to get the reported numbers out, and increasing focus on Solvency II and how to optimize your different Solvency II KPIs or key performance indicators. So there will be more and more dialogue between the different departments. Ultimately, there will need to be some additional type of alignment, and I think the sooner we can get more alignment between the different departments, the smoother all of the change processes will be. And the next step will be improved governance and risk identification. So the improved governance comes from having stricter control over the different processes and stricter control over the flow of information and the checks which are in place. And the risk identification, there will be risks which are already well known and well documented to a company, which will, of course, under the Solvency II framework, you get a list of risks which you need to measure. but there are also risks which might be specific to your market, or risks which might be specific to your company, or if you're in a group, that might be specific to the group. And not all of them are necessarily inside of the Solvency II standard model. And maybe some of these, maybe some companies will have an internal model which tries to capture more of these risks, but some companies will just not. So by having increased dialogue and more communication between different departments, there will be more opportunities to see different types of risks, in particular operational risks which could occur, and this might lead to a phase where a company will be interested in optimizing its processes and increasing its automation to reduce the chance of these risks becoming realized. This improved governance and risk identification coming from the increased dialogue will lead probably to a more holistic view, or holistic view is really the enterprise risk management view of the whole company, so that the company can understand its entire risk profile. And once a company understands its entire risk profile and they have the governance in place to trust the figures which are coming from this, they will have a very good basis for the information to be able to make business decisions going forward. And this is going to be very important information for the senior management to be able to run the company. Of course, senior management, moving on to the next one, so I'm saying one of the other advantages will be improved strategic information. One of the things that we will need to do is we will need to summarize the massive amount of calculations which actuaries and CERAs will need to perform. And we will need to summarize these into key figures which the senior management will understand and appreciate. And for this, we will probably need to define some new KPIs. There are some KPIs which are already well known from the Solvency II world, but under IFRS, we will probably need to create some new KPIs which will be able to provide the maximum amount of information with a few key figures for management to continue with. And there's different ways that you can do it. You will have some absolute values, the value of your company, for example, or your PVFP, or you can have some which will be defined more as a hurdle rate, whereas you can look at the economic value added of a certain product in combination with the amount of capital which is required to finance that business. And so then you can look at things which will be interpreted more as a hurdle rate or as a percentage to know what return you will require from a certain type of business. And you can use that to improve your pricing or your product management, and all of this information can be taken as a cycle to continuously improve and update the way that your company is creating product and creating value within itself. And with all of this, ultimately, there will be increased opportunities for companies to optimize their business model, understanding their business so much better, and to optimize their risk versus reward position. Ultimately, we can create for companies an efficient frontier with risk and reward on two different axes. Maybe it's your value or your solvency ratio divided by the amount of solvency capital that you have to require. And by understanding exactly what part of risk new business and new products contribute towards your business, you can write or aim to write a certain amount of business and change your risk budgets in such a way that you can optimize the amount of risk that your company accepts to choose your position on an efficient frontier or your risk versus reward position within the limits that you have or you have chosen to set for yourself. So that's what I think the route will look like in the real value to companies, what it will look like in the next few years. And that is everything that I have to say today. So this is my final slide. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask me or Javier or Henning right now. Or otherwise, I will also be at the back for a little while, and you can come and ask me any questions that you have. Does anyone have any questions at this point? No? Then thank you very much for your time.